Now comes the question of where to play the AFC Championship game if it's a neutral site that is required. And there are many different scenarios that might actually be moot based on the results of the upcoming weekend. But we come out of Week 18, we will know what the scenarios are, how the playoffs need to play out for this AFC Championship to be played at a neutral site to make it fair that, okay, Bills, you didn't have a shot at the winning in scenario at the 1 seed, but you still get a chance to play in the AFC Championship game at Kansas City. No, you'll have to play it at a neutral site, at least as a nod to them for having beaten Kansas City, and so on and so forth. Let's have this conversation now.
Let's do it.
Because I know how you feel about it.
Yeah.
That you want it to be indoors.
I think it's like a Super Bowl. I think you need to play it in the best possible conditions.
And I will push back, not like we're setting this up as a first take, but I will say it should be outdoors. It should be outdoors because if the game was in Kansas City, if the game was going to be in Buffalo, the game's going to be in Cincinnati, it's going to be outdoors. And I know you can't mirror the same elements as whatever would be on game day in Cincinnati if you're somewhere else outdoors, but you should play it in a cold weather site.
Why?
Because it would have been at a cold weather site anyway. And these teams are built to play in the cold weather. And that's the way it was going to be. So you might as well have it outdoors.
Are they built for cold weather? Because Green Bay is a cold weather team, but they're not built for cold weather.
Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati play their games outdoors.
But Kansas City is built for indoors.
Right.
They can't run the ball.
AFC, the championship game, if it was going to be hosted by any of these three teams, would have been outdoors. So I say play it outdoors. And
so,
you play it
outdoors.
It
in Chicago in 0 degrees and snow?
Sure.
There's no player that would sign for that.
I know there's no player that would sign for that, but it would also be somewhat understandable for me that it's a cold weather site. It would have been cold in Kansas City. You know, how much colder would it have been in Chicago than Kansas City? Or don't have it in Chicago if you're concerned about bitter, freezing weather. I mean, I guess it could be just as bitter, freezing weather in Cleveland. I mean, if it's between Kansas City and Cincinnati, I prefer to choose a cold weather site that has direct flights into that town.
What about MetLife?
But Kansas City, to send Kansas City to New York, you want Kansas City fans to either have a short flight or a drivable distance.
Got it. Yep.
That's what you want.
I got you.
So you can't have it in New Orleans. By the way, let me ask you this question. If you have it indoors in New Orleans and it's between Kansas City and Cincinnati, is that not a home field advantage for Joe Burrow? If you've got fans that want to go root for Joe Burrow, laugh all you want.
No.
Dude, Joe Burrow, I bet you Joe Burrow will never buy a meal in New Orleans again the rest of his life.
That's true.
Seriously.
We all know when you win as a college star in especially a small town, not New Orleans is a small town, you are legendary. So, Joe Burrow is
could
a
run
legend
for
down
mayor in New Orleans. And
parts.
Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase show up to play an AFC Championship game in New Orleans. You don't think Kansas City would be like, what?
Also,
really?
Clyde Edwards-Helaire went to LSU. So there's, other teams that can. But, when you're the quarterback, let's just put it that way, of the national championship, and you were in the Heisman Trophy, and you were the number one pick,
I think it's the same.
Buffalo and Kansas City.
I see
you know what one neutral site they won't be using if it's outdoors, if it's Buffalo and Kansas City? Cincinnati. That would be somewhat disrespectful.
Yeah.
I would imagine. But is there a scenario? Did Pelissero say there was a scenario that it would be a neutral site if it's Buffalo and Cincinnati? Didn't he say that? I think he mentioned that there was if Buffalo, if Cincinnati
Tom
was
had my mind blown, Rich.
He said that.
Tom was like the beautiful mind gym.
Right, he's moving things up.
If there is a neutral site, Buffalo and Cincinnati, that's required, I've got an interesting one. And I know Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Acrisure.
It's right down from Buffalo, and it's right
pretty
up,
much in the
It is
middle.
in the middle.
But their field is so horrible.
But also though,
They would redo.
you know, I mean, I don't know how many.
Whatever.
You know, if the Bengals would be like, that's not neutral to us.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Bengals would enjoy
You know
that.
what I mean? Here's the thing. Regardless of indoor or outdoor, I think it should be outdoor because it would have been
outdoor
anyway.
anyway.
You think it's indoor because if you're going to have a neutral site, you want the game to be played in the best possible conditions.
Yeah,
And
I think
that's
so.
the Super Bowl mentality of
Right.
removing weather from the equation.
That's my opinion, yes.
But it's got, you've got to have it in a spot that has got a ton of nonstop flights
You want the fans to be able to go to
and
the game.
driving.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
if they can drive, it's somewhat drivable. And not like Larry David considering it 90 minutes outside of town as a destination wedding he won't go see.
Don't go. Don't go.
Like what, 4 or 5 hour drive, 10 max.
So think of what you got.
I don't know.
I mean, Nashville's not bad.
That's actually, yeah. That's
Nashville for Cincinnati and Kansas City.
Kansas City.
Yeah.
I mean,
Nashville to Kansas City
That's not a bad one.
is 500 miles. And Nashville to Cincinnati.
it's much closer, I'd imagine.
It's closer. It's 280 miles.
3. So
I mean, this is the sort of stuff you have to
Gotta think.
consider. You can't just say, you know what, send them all, send Miami and Buffalo down to, send Kansas City and Buffalo down to Miami or Atlanta. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Charlotte.
that's
It's decent enough. The weather will be okay if you want to play outdoors.
Right. And indoors, Detroit is pulling up their turf.
Yeah,
Indianapolis has got a
Minnesota.
volleyball tournament.
Minnesota had a Super Bowl. They're ready.
Minnesota, but they might have a home playoff game.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
Minnesota
right.
might actually be
That's
active,
right.
brother.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so-
You got to think of teams that aren't going to be.
I don't know what other dome situations are in the Midwest. That's kind of centrally located. You go to Las Vegas.
But what are you going to tell Cincinnati fans go fly out to Las Vegas?
They will.
Buffalo fans fly out to Las Vegas? I know they will.
they will.
Chris. I understand that. But you've got to also, let's be convenient, right? Let's be convenient about it. And plus, I would imagine they wouldn't choose Vegas because they got a Pro Bowl there the next week. I mean, logistically, you understand what this would mean logistically? Obviously, hotel rooms would be easier to get in Las Vegas than many places. I mean, there are some intersections in Las Vegas that have more hotel rooms than certain cities that the NFL plays in, but yeah, I mean, you got to choose somewhere in the Midwest and preferably outdoors.
Yeah. That kind of goes to the question I wanted to ask you guys. Like, what are you rooting for? Are you kind of rooting for chaos?
No, I'm not. What I'm rooting for is something that would have just been anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't need to add chaos to this.
Just anyway,
scenario.
like a wild card team makes it and takes on one of these teams in the top 3 and they host one.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm hoping. I would hope for that. We're not sitting here championship weekend going shoulda, woulda, coulda, while DeMar Hamlin's sitting wherever he is, hopefully getting better, and taking this in and going, am I the cause of this? Something stupid. Where 3-4 weeks from now we're like, well, if DeMar Hamlin didn't, almost get killed on the field, this would be different. I don't want to talk about it in the same way I would turn the page. I just want to focus on this kid getting better and football separate. That's what I'm hoping for. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.